as the Maroon people. The fact that they
Right.
can go to each group, to each tribe, have a Krutu meeting, right? The traditional meeting, KRUTU, the Krutu, have a Krutu meeting and come to a conclusion about where any one of those groups is allowed to travel to in the bush, a creek, a random creek in the
Mm.
deep bush, right? Because they still all know their history that well,
Right.
right?
There you go.
And you have to also think about it. When people name a place, it means that they have some relationship with the place. So when you find these little riverines, these little small creeks deep in the bush, it means that at some point in history, there was some sort of significant interaction with that location. And they
Mm.
did that, which I thought was very clever. I went to a couple of the meetings, and uh, it was naive because, of course, the government is not going to give, 85, 90% of the landmass to this population of people, to the tribal and
But
Amerindian
they
people to make decisions about.
but they bargained hard, and I can respect that. They were
I respect that too.
yeah
That
they bargained hard. They just went for they went for broke.
right, they went for broke for sure. Because even when they sued the government, of Suriname, they were able to solicit and secure support from the Forest Peoples Program, which is like this. They're based in England. They do a lot of like indigenous tribal land right support. They're like a group of lawyers for all over the world, right? They assist
Right.
tribal people all over the world in these kinds of issues. So that case went on for years, for like 7 years, right? Because it was
Wow.
2007 when the case was adjudicated, and the government had to do this demarcation. And of course, they're just now, from 2007, just now actually putting together a law for the land rights, for the demarcation.
Nice.
But up until this point, from then 2007 up until now, they've done many things to help better visualize their presence on the landscape, their historical presence on the landscape. And this is where the history part comes in. So that
Right.
what you're seeing here on the right side, the far right side of the screen, was a participatory three-dimensional model mapping exercise that they did with this Dutch non-governmental organization, NGO,
Hmm.
that helped them basically create this physical image of their territory, of their ancestral territory. And this is just the Saramakans, by the way. Now, the role of history here, what I was asked to do was to assist in collecting information about tangible and intangible sites on the
Right.
landscape. And it turned out that we collected about 60 different locations, right? Locations that can be attributed to old Amerindian settlements that we didn't know about, but also locations that are attributed to their old settlements that are in the bush proper, right?
Mm.
Because again, remember, at that time when they were running away from the plantations, they were settling in the forest. They had proper villages deep in the proper bush between the major rivers, living in the
Mm.
bush. A village with agricultural plot, ritual areas, places where they had fought with the Dutch and so forth, or places of protection. So these were villages these are places that no one goes to. There may be several
Right.
kilometers, 2 days walk into the bush to get to them. So they provided all this great information on, even locations where they go for hunting. There are places where they just normally go and hunt, and there are places where they only hunt for ritual activities. When there's some sort of ritual activity in the village, they go and they hunt certain animals in certain locations, or
Right.
places where they plant and harvest rice for certain ritual activities. So there's so much nuance to how you interpret the landscape for culture, not just my little agricultural plot in back of the house, or my little house that's right next to the water side. What they ended up doing was defining their territory, Saramakas, defining their ancestral territory basically across the whole southern part of the country.
Wow.
So from where the Matawai people live, going all the way east, if you remember the map we saw earlier, all the way
Mm.
east to the Marawena River, Lawa,
Hmm.
on that's that
Close to French Guyana.
right, exactly, that borders that side. So that
Mm.
whole area, this physical map that you see there represents that whole landmass,
Okay.
And for
Okay.
them, it's like, yes, we have old places in the bush. These are our old places in the bush, and those are the old places of Indians, and we know this because we traverse the bush. You know, I think that's the important thing to understand here, is that people know this, again, because this is where they subsist. This is where they hunt. This is where they gather. This is where they get the wood to make their homes, to make their boats that they're dependent on, for their medicine. This is where they subsist, in this environment, you know. So you can't force people out of it, and then you give them nothing in return, or force people to live in urban squalor in the city, which is what the situation would be if they had to move into Paramaribo, so to live basically in urban squalor.
Right.
The building that you see there, the nice building, is the Saramaka Museum. In the last few years, they've been able to get money, and they've put together their own museum. And you know, in the structures, that the images you see below that museum building are replicas of a traditional Saramaka house, what that looks like. The one on the right, on the far corner there, with the stick going across with the leaves, that's what's called an azampao, which is at the entrance of very traditional villages, you see the azampao, and it's an indicator that it's a traditional village. Yeah, it lets an outsider know that this is a traditional Saramaka village. We're not Christians. We don't do the Christianity thing here. You know, we're about traditional practices. So they've taken the whole heritage thing a notch up, right? You know, using their historical knowledge, that oral historical knowledge they have, understanding the relevance of situating their heritage in a museum format, so that people who venture into the interior can go and visit and see what how they represent their culture in that kind of setting. You know who is here? Bob Marley's granddaughter.
Really?
The dreadlocks one. They're all dreadlocks.
Oh God! If you say her name, I'll know her.
Something Pendergrass, something like that. I don't remember her properly.
Oh yes, Donisha.
I think that's her name. Yeah, there's some videos on YouTube though that you can see with her there, visiting the Saramaka Museum. They were happy to welcome her.